Hello VC. Something I've been meaning to do for some time now. Actually I did last week record this video already, but I did some needle drops on everything and YouTube wasn't too happy about it. So here's another version of it. Let's hope it works. So lately I've been hearing quite a few comments on the VC about how ECM is a boring label. I get that, I know where this is coming from, but ECM is 50 years old if you think about it, and they've been issuing lots of records, hundreds, if not thousands. I don't know, I haven't checked the whole catalog, but what I know is that I got a shitload of ECMs, and the ones I didn't like, I got rid of them, but what remains is the stuff I really like, and still quite a lot. So I thought, let's make a case for ECM, 10 records that show you ECM is a label worth investigating, collecting, diving into. First, Julian Priester. Julian Priester was a member of the Sunrise Orchestra, and this is his first album as a leader. There's like 10 people on it, it came out in '74. It's called Love Love. This is Love Love, the track. It's a long ass track. It's yeah, something like 20 minutes almost. It's like this weird proto minimal funk track, but it's a jazz track, and it's not that far away from the stuff that interests me the most in Sunrise, to be honest. Stuff like Media Dreams, Disco 3000, kind of cycle music, repetitive or minimalist at least. So you got this drum, this bass line, and then tons of stuff happening in the periphery, sometimes taking the foreground. Julian Priester did another album on ECM, which is really good, but this one is the one to have. Also, quite a good example of the ECM cover art. Pretty good. Next is a record that is probably one of my favorite jazz records, top 10 definitely. It's a cheap one. The Julian Priester got a little bit expensive of late. This is Old Dreams, New Dreams, which is Don Cherry, Dewey Redman, Charlie Hayden, Ed Blackwell. 6 tracks, each of them get an original composition, while there's 2 tracks from Ornette Coleman, which is the figure that launched their career in many ways. Like, they were all part of his band, and these tracks are great, Lonely Woman and Open or Close. But on this, Charlie Hayden, he's got this track called Whales, in the hope that they will soon be protected by international law. Oh, Song for the Whales, where he used the bow to great effect. There's like a long intro of only him bowing in almost ambient droney way before it becomes some spiritual jazz monster. And all the tracks are good, referencing non-Western music, as well as Ed Blackwell's composition Togo is based on Ghanese traditional music, and Don Cherry's Guinea, well, you get the name, essential and still fairly cheap. Then maybe my favorite cover on ECM, Michael Nora. Michael Nora is a German pianist, and yeah, he's been around since the 60s, maybe even 50s. Really good guy. He played with Carl Berger. Anyways, this features also Wolfgang Scholter and Eberhard Weber, amongst other people, and it kind of is in a very different way. It's got this very long track, Salvatore, like funky but not spiritual jazz. Just absolutely fantastic record from '75. so the golden age maybe in many regards. Yeah, this is Michael Nora has got lots of other records, including on ECM, but this one is very special. Next, something a bit different. ECM has also released quite a lot of modern classical music, avant-garde, minimalism, lots of Steve Reich. I believe also some, maybe John Adams, John Cage. But there's one musician that gets very little mention outside of the avant-garde and should. And especially since she was released by ECM on many occasions. Meredith Monk. This is Turtle Dreams. This is my favorite album of hers. The track is called View 2. It's Meredith Monk on voice, piano, Mini Moog, Casio, with Colin Walcott and didgeridoo, and also organs. She did lots of music for the ballet, for dancing, but all her work is around the voice. She's got this very... I mean, she's not like Joan La Barbara, it's different. More minimalistic in a way, but really, really good. Yeah, Meredith Monk, very well worth investigating. This is from '83. Now something, I've never seen anyone mention this one, is John Clark. It's his album Faces, featuring David Friedman on vibro harp and marimba. There's this track called Faces in the Fire, where David Friedman on marimba, the vibes. He's a great vibe player, but he's never been as good as on this one. The album is good, but don't get me wrong. For the Faces in the Fire track only, this is worth the price of admission. I'm pretty certain that this is still cheap. I haven't checked, but like no one ever mentioned this. This is from '81. Now something a little more traditional in a way, also a great cover. This is Enrico Rava. Enrico Rava is this trumpet player. He sometimes plays different horns. This features Franco D'Andrea on piano and Giovanni Tommaso on bass, but more importantly, Bruce Dittmas on drums. Bruce Dittmas is, in my opinion, the most underrated jazz drummer in the history of jazz. Maybe alongside Jack Tolo. But Jack Tolo is getting some hype. So there's this track on this album called, I believe it's the track called Small Talk. Yeah, it's the last track on side one. This is traditional jazz until Bruce plays the drums. And it's not becoming like an improv free jazz monster, far from that. But it's becoming something really creative and very sneaky, how he introduces very modern concepts to modern jazz, modernizing modern jazz. This is from 1979. Really, really good album, especially for that track. But that's what we are looking for, good tracks and good albums. It's a plus. But this now also probably top 10 jazz records ever. Man, ECM is good. There you go. The Bieder Funeral Beer Ensemble. It's Bengt Berger, a Swedish percussion player. And this album is the Bieder Funeral Beer. It became a band. There's lots of people, including Don Cherry, Christer Bothén, lots of great people. Even she's not named here, but I believe Anita Liv Strand is. Yeah, she's singing on some of it. This is like ambientish, tribal ambient jazz from '82. It's absolutely fantastic, and really a great a record that I think that it's become of late a little bit pricey, not hundreds of dollars pricey, but still not as easy as it used to be. But there's a live recording that was issued officially of the Bieder Funeral Beer Ensemble, which is almost the same as this album. It's the same pieces, and while it's not a studio recording, this was not really a studio recording either, or it was to some capacity, but there's some field recordings and stuff like that. So, of course, get this if you can, and until if it's difficult, if it's proving difficult, get the other stuff. There's another band, Bitter Funeral Beer record on Dragon, the Swedish label, that is not only a little bit pricey, but also almost invisible. I've only seen it twice. Now for something quite different, but also almost essential. Trands by Steve Kuhn from '75, I believe. Yes. This is his comeback album. It is basically, he got fired from the John Coltrane band in the 60s, and it was quite a difficult position to be in many ways, and yeah, that crushed him. Steve Kuhn is this modern jazz, almost avant-garde sometimes in the 60s piano player, and that episode crushed him. He went into a deep depression. He did a few records, but this is the one where he felt like, I'm back on my foot. There are a few good stuff he did in between, of course, but this one includes an insert, a conversation with Robert Hurwitz from '74. It's basically like an interview where he goes in details with all that. And the track Trands, it's piano, Steve Swallow on bass, electric bass, Jack DeJohnette on drums, Sue Evans on perc. It is a monster spiritual jazz, very, very calm, very soothing, very lush, deep, almost velvetish production. Amazing album, especially for the track Trands. Now something also less talked about. Bill Frisell. This is his inline album from '83. Bill Frisell is one of the two masters of the volume pedal guitar, in my opinion, alongside with Fred Frith, whom he performed alongside within Naked City, the band that John Zorn put together in the 80s up until the mid-90s, I believe, also featuring Marc Ribot. But on this, he's alone. It's a pure solo with bass on some tracks by Arild Andersen. There's this track called Two Arms. Gorgeous. Fantastic use of the volume pedal. Very cool melodies. Very nice until suddenly it gets a little dark. But not dark in a menacing way or anything. It's just like you can hear there's like layers in his musical world. So this is probably cheap as well. And he's got a few others on ECM. There's another one that I highly recommend. The name escapes me right now, but this one. And lastly, what we're listening to right now, one of the greatest albums of the past 20 years, in my opinion. John Hassell. Last night the moon came, dropping its clothes in the street, and we're currently listening to the track called Last Night the Moon Came. This features a bunch of people, including Rick Cox on guitar, great minimalist guitarist from the 70s, 80s mostly, and a lot of people I don't really know. John Hassell had a resurgence of late. He put out 2 albums in the past few years that were, this is from 2009, and John Hassell is also the master of not the volume trumpet, but kind of basically he was part of this album called Possible Worlds with Brian Eno in 1980, I believe, or 79 maybe, the one on with the pink cover, one of the absolute best ambient records, and essentially because of John Hassell, in my opinion, much more so than Brian Eno. This well, you can hear it a little bit if YouTube allows you to. This is absolutely fantastic. Ambient jazz, not new age at all, because there's tension underlying, as you can hear. This has become a little pricey, if not very pricey, so I don't believe there's any plan soon to reissue this. There's a CD version, but this is a testimony that ECM still is a very relevant label. Of course, they had a history with John Hassel. They released, I believe, if I remember correctly, an album of his in the early 2000s called Fascinoma, where he does covers of Duke Ellington's Caravan under the name Caravanesque, and he turns these into like ambient dub jazz, totally psychedelic music. Fantastic. But here it is. That was my case for ECM through 10 albums, and I hope that they still get to release good records and not just all this Terje Ribdal. Terje Ribdal has got some great stuff, but also some terrible stuff, and the latter is becoming the norm. And I'm also really not a fan of all this environmental music of Keith Jarrett. Actually, I can't stand it, to be honest, but to each its own. There's a lot to be had in the ECM catalog. In the 80s they had all this like ethnic jazz with Stefan Mikus that I believe ages terribly, but they tried something, and I believe it is much harder for them to do so these days, but this is the proof that they still do achieve something sometimes, and the back catalog is fantastic. And we didn't show some of the Mal Waldron from the early 70s, but that was crazy good modern jazz as well. So here it is. I hope you're all doing fine, and that you're having a good day, maybe an even more so thanks to this, and I'll see you in the comments hopefully. Bye.